We're turning to Washington now, where there are serious questions being raised around the discovery of documents marked classified at locations linked to President Biden. Our Adriana Diaz, who broke the story, looked into what exactly the term classified means and whether it's typical for documents like these to leave the White House.
House Republicans want answers.
We need to know who had access to those documents,
including a list of who visited President Biden's Wilmington home, where 5 more pages marked classified were discovered last week. The White House counsel's office said in a statement that there are no logs, writing in part, like every president across decades of modern history, his personal residence is personal.
Are these all the documents? Are there more out there?
So far, roughly 20 classified documents have been found at Mr. Biden's home and former office that the White House says were immediately handed over to the National Archives. In contrast, the FBI seized more than 100 documents from Mar-a-Lago in August after former President Donald Trump denied repeated requests to turn them all over. Presidents and vice presidents can take classified documents home with little accounting of what they have and where, says former acting CIA director Michael Morell.
They're cut slack because of who they are. And I think that's what has to end. Somebody needs to be put in charge of knowing what information has gone to the residents and making sure that that information comes back.
Mary McCord, who oversaw the National Security Division at the Department of Justice, says the labeling is clear.
Classified documents have markings on them so that they would be immediately identifiable as classified.
There are 3 broad classification levels: confidential, secret, and top secret, depending on the risk the intelligence, if it gets out, poses to national security. The levels are indicated on cover pages, like these from the Mar-a-Lago seizure, and on the top and bottom of each page, as shown in this mock-up. And there's a wide range of what can be considered classified.
We're talking about military intelligence, we're talking about human sources, we're talking about nuclear-related material. I think what is key here is less about what types of things can be secret and more about the harm that these things would cause to national security if they were disclosed.
The Presidential Records Act, the way it's supposed to work is at the end of an administration, all government documents, both classified and unclassified, belonging to a president or vice president are supposed to be turned over to the National Archives. So a key question that the special counsel will have to determine is why these documents weren't at the archives. Anne-Marie?
Adriana, when I say something is top secret in my personal life, it means don't tell anyone. It's going to stay between just us two. When I hear top secret, I imagine that there are only a handful of people who have that level of clearance. Is that the case? How rare is it?
Anne-Marie, there are more people than you probably think that have top secret clearance. It's more than 1 million people. But that's not to say that this is information that isn't highly sensitive, highly dangerous if it gets out. And there's also a subset of top secret called SCI, Special Compartmentalized Information. I've learned a lot about intelligence over the past 2 weeks. And that also has to do with, among other things, the way intelligence was gathered, often having to do with a human source, meaning an informant whose life would be put at risk if that information got out. And of course, if that information got out, it would be a grave threat to national security.
So yesterday when we spoke, I think, you mentioned that sometimes they just don't keep track of these documents because lawmakers are trusted to take them and bring them back. When it comes to these documents, is any of this illegal or is it just, bad optics?
So Mike Morell, the former acting director of the CIA, said this is really an issue, especially for top-level officials who get leeway because of who they are to take documents and bring them back. And it's really the honor system. It's the president of the United States, so if he wants to take a document home, usually that is not questioned and it's not kept track of. But day to day, it happens that lower level officials do take things home by mistake. And when that happens, either it's called in or it's brought back the next day. And there can be administrative penalties because it is against the law to have classified information not in a secured location, but it happens. So what often will happen is perhaps you get a warning, an administrative penalty, a suspension, you lose your security clearance, that sort of thing. when it becomes criminal, when criminal charges could come, that really depends on whether or not it was intentional that you took this classified information home. Because of course, what are you doing with it? Who else is seeing it? It's no longer in a secure location. So that's what the special counsel has determined, is whether this was just sloppiness, was this carelessness, was this someone who put this information in a folder and didn't realize, packing up in the rush days at the end of an administration, or was this intentional? Was this information that somebody knowingly took out of the White House and made sure and did not get to the archives and took home and ended up in these boxes, in these locations, in this closet at the former office of President Biden, at the Penn Biden Center, or at his home?
I mean, I know people say that it happens. It just, when you look at the markings on the documents, they seem just so clear. And I know that I feel like if I was tasked with working with material like this, you'd be aware of it, but clearly not always. Yeah, go ahead.
You just never know. We don't know what the form was that these documents were in when they were first packed up. Were they in a folder?
Right.
How did this all work out? So there's so many unanswered questions, but I'm glad that we got to dig in a little bit more into what a classified document is, what it typically looks like, to help fill in the blanks. But again, we don't know the circumstances.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. Adriana, thank you very much. Excellent reporting. I'm learning so much from you with your reporting. Thank you.
Thanks, Emery.